If you read the comment sections of any World War II documentary, you will witness a fascinating, yet entirely delusional, psychological war. Americans proudly claim they swooped in to save the world. The British declare they held the line alone. The Soviets argue that their immense blood sacrifice bought the victory. They all share one comforting Hollywood illusion, the Band of Brothers. The romantic belief that the Allied armies were noble hierarchies built on mutual respect, fighting to preserve every human life. Today, we are tearing up the Hollywood scripts. We are conducting a clinical, forensic autopsy on the military structures of the Allied powers. We will examine how they actually processed human biology into statistics, viewed through the cold, mathematical lens of the German perspective. I will warn you right now, this autopsy will shatter your national pride. If you drop off early, you are only protecting your own ego. By the time we reach the third military machine, you will realize that the regimes you call the good guys treated their own soldiers with an industrial ruthlessness that perfectly rivaled their enemies. Let's open the files. Case File 3, The British Empire and the Colonial Shield. British pop history loves the myth of the stiff upper lip, the brave English Tommy standing firm against the fascist tide. But from a German tactical perspective, the British military hierarchy was not a brotherhood. It was an archaic, class-obsessed machine that actively insulated its elite by consuming secondary populations. The standard British infantryman was a working-class teenager stuffed into a wool uniform that soaked up rain like a sponge. He was paid a mere 14 shillings a week, a fraction of what an American private earned, and was commanded by aristocratic officers who viewed him strictly as a statistical unit. In the comments, British and American viewers constantly argue over the pronunciation of junior officers. The British say, "Lieutenant." The Americans say, "Lieutenant." But the German snipers did not care about your linguistics. No matter how you pronounce the rank, the average life expectancy of a junior infantry officer leading a platoon in the Normandy bocage was roughly 3 weeks. But the most ruthless mathematical reality of the British military did not involve English soldiers at all. It involved the colonial shield. The British Empire engineered a global system of kinetic absorption. The British Indian Army became the largest volunteer force in human history, swelling to over 2.5 million men. But volunteer is a semantic illusion when applied to a starving colonial populace. British officers utilized Indian, African, and Commonwealth biology to absorb the blunt force trauma of Axis offensives in the most brutal environments on Earth. In the jungles of Burma, during the twin kinetic zones of Impal and Kohima, colonial troops suffered catastrophic attrition rates. In the Italian campaign, particularly at Monte Cassino, the British High Command threw waves of Indian, Gurkha, and New Zealand troops against impregnable German fortified lines. Over 87,000 Indian soldiers died in the war, with another 34,000 severely wounded. When Winston Churchill praised the victory at El Alamein, he was praising a tactical maneuver paid for heavily by the blood of the colonies. The British did not win through superior tactical genius. They won by using the vast, strategic resources of their empire as a biological blast shield to insulate the home islands from the true cost of war. Case File 2, The American Logistical Sledgehammer. In the comment sections, Europeans frequently mock the Americans for being late to both world wars. Meanwhile, American cinema portrays its soldiers as the brilliant, tactical saviors of the European theater. From the German perspective, both views completely missed the clinical reality. When the United States Army finally landed in Europe, the German Wehrmacht did not fear American tactical superiority. In fact, German infantry manuals often noted the initial clumsiness and poor field craft of American ground troops. What the German High Command feared was American industrial mathematics. The American military structure was not a brotherhood, it was a corporate assembly line. The U.S. military utilized a deeply flawed individual replacement system, informally known as the repel déplace. Instead of rotating exhausted units out of the line, the American corporation fed lone, terrified 18-year-old replacements directly into veteran units while they were still in active combat. This system completely destroyed unit cohesion and guaranteed that new arrivals were often killed before anyone even learned their names. Furthermore, junior officers were mass-produced in accelerated, 90-day training programs. These 90-day wonders were shipped across the Atlantic and fed into the frontline with systemic, fatal inexperience. In brutal attritional battles like the Hurtgen Forest, where the U.S. Army suffered over 33,000 casualties for a few miles of useless pine trees, a junior officer's life expectancy was less than 14 days. In some American infantry divisions, the casualty rate for rifle company lieutenants exceeded 200%. The position was wiped out and replaced twice over in a matter of months. And the American command did not rely on the tactical finesse of its infantry to solve problems. If an American platoon encountered a German machine gun nest, they did not execute a brilliant flanking maneuver. They simply pulled out a radio. They called in an overwhelming, disproportionate volume of high-explosive artillery and close air support. The Americans perfected a tactic called time on target, sinking multiple artillery batteries miles apart so that hundreds of shells would impact a single coordinate at the exact same second. During the war in Europe, the U.S. Army fired over 8 million tons of artillery shells. They did not outmaneuver the enemy, they simply erased the grid square. To the German observers, the American soldier was not a tactical warrior. He was merely a biological delivery mechanism for an industrial sledgehammer. The U.S. Army functioned as a corporation that achieved victory by outspending the enemy in steel, high explosives, and the blood of poorly trained teenagers. Case File 1: The Soviet Demographic Flood. We now arrive at the Soviet Union. Apologists constantly remind us that the Red Army tore the heart out of the German military. This is biologically true. Roughly 80% of all German military casualties occurred on the Eastern Front. But the method of that Soviet victory remains the darkest, most clinical reality of the entire 20th century. The Soviet command hierarchy did not view its soldiers as individuals. They viewed them as a liquid asset, a biological resource to be spent with absolute, chilling indifference. When the German military analyzed Soviet counteroffensives, they were often baffled by the complete lack of self-preservation. Soviet generals operated under the political terror of Stalin's Order 227. Not one step back. To enforce this, the NKVD deployed heavily armed blocking detachments behind their own lines, equipped with machine guns to neutralize any Soviet soldier who retreated. Official Soviet records indicate that over 158,000 Red Army soldiers were legally sanctioned by their own tribunals and barrier troops for cowardice or unauthorized retreat. But this was just the beginning of the demographic flooding. The most horrifying example of this clinical ruthlessness was the deployment of the Strafbat, the special duty units. Over 422,000 political prisoners, disgraced soldiers, and civilians were stripped of their humanity, handed obsolete weapons, and used as human clearing mechanisms. If the Red Army encountered an active German minefield, they did not wait for combat engineers or specialized equipment. General George E. Zhukov openly admitted to American General Dwight D. Eisenhower that when the Soviet Army approached a minefield, the infantry was ordered to march directly through it as if the mines were not there. The special duty units cleared the path using the kinetic detonation of their own bodies. In battles like the Rusev Meat Grinder, the Soviet High Command threw waves of infantry against entrenched German machine guns for over a year, suffering well over 1 million casualties in a single, localized salient. The official military death toll for the Soviet Union sits at a staggering 8.7 million human beings. The Red Army did not defeat the Wehrmacht through superior tactical genius. They defeated them by mathematically calculating that the German war machine would melt the barrels of its MG-42s and run out of bullets before the Soviet Union ran out of active manpower. Part 4: The Verdict. Hollywood wants you to believe that the Axis powers were the only regimes that treated human beings like industrial components. But a forensic examination of the Allies reveals a chilling mirror image. The British Empire used its colonial subjects as kinetic absorbers to insulate and protect the homeland. The Americans treated their junior officers and infantry replacements as disposable, mass-produced corporate assets in a logistical spreadsheet. And the Soviets achieved victory through the unapologetic, calculated attrition of their own biomass, enforced by the barrel of a gun. My forensic question to you is this: which of these three Allied commands do you believe was the most ruthless and callous toward the biology of its own soldiers? Let your national pride go, and leave your clinical verdict in the comments below. If you want to see how the system punished the men who actually designed these kinetic zones, click here for the autopsy of the hypocrisy of WW2 explained by German. I'll see you in the lab.